Okay, time is 2 p.m., so I will call the Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025 regular council meeting to order and begin with a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta District 11. We recognize that we stand upon the land that carries the footsteps of many Indigenous peoples, including the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. The city honors the First Peoples of this land and is committed to fostering reconciliation through relationship building, knowledge gathering, and education. And just for housekeeping, because we do have guests in the audience today, if an emergency should sound, you would exit through those doors and go to the muster point, or if those were closed, you would join our staff and go out and follow around. Just stay with our staff and we would make sure you get somewhere safe. That's what they tell me. Okay, so with that, we have nothing for consent agenda, so I will ask for approval of the April 8th, 2025 regular council meeting minutes. Councillor Nguyen. Whoops, just a second. Try that again. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll move that council approve the minutes of the April 8th, 2025 regular council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Are there any errors or omissions? Not seeing any. I will close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimous. Next is delegations. If there's anybody in the audience, and I'm not seeing anybody who's not part of the delegation or presentations, and nobody has registered online, so I'm assuming there's nobody who wishes to speak to any of the items. So I will just continue on, and we will go directly to presentations. 5.1, 2024 Audit Findings Report. And we have Sheldon Jacobs and Temto. You can do the introductions. Thank you. Yes, you're on.
Okay. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Colleen Wagner, and I'm the Senior Accountant of Accounting and Reporting, and I will be doing a bunch of presentations for you today for our year end. What we're going to start with here, not that one. There we are. Sorry, bear with me. All right, I think I've got it now. So today we have a jam-packed afternoon for you all. We have 4 items for finance. We have the 2024 Audit Findings Report, the 2024 Consolidated Financial Statements with a motion being required, 2024 Annual Report, and last but not least, the allocation of the 2024 Operating Budget Surplus with a motion being required for that. We're going to start off with the 2024 Audit Findings Report, and with me today I have Sheldon Jacobs and Temi Arasi from KPMG, and they will be going through the Audit Findings Report.
Good afternoon, Council. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to present our Audit Findings Report for the audit of the City's consolidated financial statements for fiscal 2024. Myself and my colleague Temi, we will walk you through our presentation, which was provided to you in advance of today's meeting. Before I do that, though, I would like to take this opportunity to thank administration for the hard work and effort that was put into completing the financial reporting for 2024. It's key for us to get full cooperation, which we did get, to allow us to fulfill our responsibilities as your external auditors. So with this, we'll just jump right into the highlight screen here. So this first screen basically will provide a summary of the topics that we're going to speak to this afternoon. Any of the slides or any of the topics that have a pink slider next to them are items that we're going to speak to. Anything with a black slider, either there was no substantive changes from the planning presentation we gave to council back in November, or those items aren't applicable for this year's audit. So moving on to the next slide. The status of the audit. When this presentation was sent to council, we were still wrapping up a few of our activities and some of the loose ends associated with the year end, but I'm pleased to report to you that these items have all now been completed as of today's date. There's no additional findings to report to council that came out of those items. So what you have in front of you here really is a full and complete reporting of our results for fiscal 2024. There's a few items that are part of wrapping up an audit, which is we receive what we call a signed management representation letter. A draft copy of that letter is in the package here for your information, and that basically is a letter that we received from administration asserting to us that they fully cooperated with our audit. We complete a review of subsequent events, so any material events that have happened since December 31st, we complete and we update up to today's date. So as of today's date, we're not aware of any other events that were really material to the 2024 financial statements that need to be reported as part of fiscal 2024. And if there is any item that council is aware of that would be material to those financial statements, today would be this meeting would be a great time to share those with us, but we're not aware of any. And then obviously, once the draft financial statements are approved by council, that's the last kind of piece to allow us to move forward with finalizing our audit. As reported back in November, we also do some additional audits around the library board. So that audit was completed and we reported to the library board of directors on March 17th. As part of the annual reporting to Alberta Municipal Affairs, the city prepares what's called a municipal financial information return. All of our audit work associated with that is completed as well. And we plan to be wrapping up two other supplemental audits that we have around the FCSS program reporting and some LAP reporting that needs to be done every 3 years. So those audits are well progressed and we're nearing the completion stages of those. There's no items that came out of any of these other four supplemental audits, or no items that we anticipate to be material in those items or with respect to those audits that we would have to report to council. So moving on to the next slide. Back in November, we spoke about some of the new accounting standards that were applicable for municipalities, not only for your municipality, but right across the country. And they related to three specific topics: the recognition of revenue, public-private partnerships, and purchase intangibles. Administration did an assessment of these accounting standards. The last two, public-private partnerships and purchase intangibles, really did not have an impact on the city's financial statements. And the new revenue standard, for all intents and purposes, your historical accounting practices were largely in line with the new revenue standards for municipalities and did not result in any material changes to your financial statements. We listed a couple other financial financial reporting standards that are going to change in the future, but they're not going to be of they're not going to have an impact for a couple of years yet. So we'll just provide an update to those items to council when we get closer to those dates. So with that, that sort of is the front end part of our presentation, and just to kind of take us from where we were when we presented our audit planning report to now into some of the details from our actual audit findings. And I'll ask my colleague Temi to walk us through the next few series of slides.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, just push your button. The red light needs to be on. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Council. I'll take it from where Sheldon stopped. This section talks about the misstatements that we identified during the audit. So we have two of them. One has been corrected in the financial statement that you have in your pack, and the other one remains uncorrected. So I'll speak to those two on the next slide. Okay, so this is the misstatement that is yet to be corrected in the financial statement that you have in your pack today, and it relates to some differences noted between the actual inventory balance at the end of the year and what is being carried in the books. This number is immaterial to the financial statements and has not been corrected. So I'll move to the next item. Yeah. So this relates to some contributed tangible capital assets that should have been recorded in the 2025 fiscal, but were initially recorded in 2024. But we noticed this during our audit, and we brought it to the attention of the administration, and this was reviewed and corrected in the financial statements. So on the next slide, this section talks about control deficiencies and observations around controls generally. The first, I'll move to the next slide, please. Yeah. So the first one here is the one we noted during the current year, and is related to the corrected misstatement that I mentioned earlier, that about contributed tangible capital assets during the year. So this has been corrected by the administration in the financial statements, like I mentioned earlier. So on the next slide, so the next three slides, we have observations from the prior audit that we raised, and what we are doing here is just to revisit those to see what the status is as of the current year's audit. So the findings around tangible capital asset reports in the prior year, we're pleased to mention that we did not notice any matters along those lines in the current year. So the reports we had in the current year were sufficient for us to complete our work easily. On the next slide, yeah, we had findings around the accumulated non-vesting sick leave data that we had to audit in the prior year. In the current year, we did not note any issues with the data that we received. For this, last year was the first time, so it had to consider some information from years prior. So in the current year, the incremental information that we had to get on this were good, and we did not notice any exceptions. Then the third one is about some IT policies and procedures, some observation we noted last year, and some best practices that we recommended last year. So as of this year, we've revisited those, and implementation is still in progress as of today. So with that, I will turn it back to Sheldon to continue with the presentation.
Well, thank you, Timmy. Just going to speak to one more slide here and wrap up our formal part of our presentation. So on slide 14, these are a number of topics that really discuss any significant changes, difficulties, performing our work, or any challenges that we would have with management and the staff. And happy to report that we have no issues with respect to any of these items that would impact the actual performance and conduct of our audit. So, that's exactly what you would want to see. If we had any challenges here, we would have to raise those to council and let you know that, we had some hurdles or road bumps along the way, but we did not have that. As I had mentioned at the start of our presentation, that it was a relatively smooth audit this year. And with that concludes the formal portion of our presentation, and we'd be open to any questions from council.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll ask council if they have any questions at this point in time. You must have done an excellent job because I'm not seeing any questions. All right, so thank you very much, and we will be dealing with this shortly.
Thank you.
Actually, next.
All right, with no questions regarding the audit findings report, we will now move on to the consolidated financial statements for 2024. These financial statements consolidate the financial position and operating results of the city and the Fort Saskatchewan Library Board, which is controlled by the city. So, highlights from the consolidated financial statements. The net financial assets increased by 4.4 million in 2024. Cash and cash equivalents and revenues receivables both increased. In 2024, the city held significant cash and cash equivalents in high interest savings accounts for future cash flow needs. Tangible capital assets increased by 22.4 million. In 2024, the city invested 26.3 million in tangible capital assets and received 12.5 million in contributed roadways, trails, and underground infrastructure in newly developed subdivisions. The city also recognized 16.2 million in amortization expenses in the year. The surplus from operations was 27.5 million, which was up from 7.8 million in 2023. This amount differs from the operating budget surplus in the annual report because it includes amortization, contributed tangible capital assets, and capital grants, which are excluded from the operating budget surplus. The operating budget surplus also includes transfers to and from reserves and debenture payments. Note 19 of the financial statements provides a reconciliation of these differences. Some other key highlights in 2024 operating results include the recognition of 2.2 million in operating transfers from other levels of government and 11.6 million in capital transfers primarily from the MSI and LGFF grant programs and the Canada Community Building Fund, formerly the Federal Gas Tax Fund. We also recognize 1.3 million in developer levies during the year, increase of 1.3 million in purchases from other governments, and decreased transfers to individuals and organizations of 1.2 million. And I will spend more time on the operating results of the city in the annual report. Are there any questions regarding the consolidated financial statements?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you for your presentation. Actually, I have a question on your previous presentation and just wondering why administration decided not to correct the misstatement that the auditors had picked out. I know it's insignificant, 195,000, not very significant.
195 for
why,
inventory.
why wouldn't you correct it?
Through your worship to Councilor Abatoya, that error was identified very late in the audit process, and we felt that it was not material or justified being amended to hold up reporting any further.
Okay, so but you did correct some other ones. So what's the process of correcting it? Like, do you just go into your spreadsheets and correct the numbers? Like, what does that look like?
Through your worship, Councilor Abatoya, we would have to go back into our financial model and update both in the model, update a number of worksheets, as well as update on the body of the financials and a number of other areas as well. When we find, when the auditors find issues like this, we always assess whether they would impact decision of council before and what the cost or the impact it would be to our timing in getting the reports out.
Okay.
In this case, we felt that it didn't
wasn't
justify
worth it.
holding out.
Okay, thank you. My second question is just on what you just presented, Colin. Thank you for your presentation again. So user fees and charges, I see that you had 3 million over what you had budgeted for 2024. What was the reason for that? I couldn't see the explanation for that.
Your worship, through to Councillor Abatoya. The main reason for the increase in the user fees and charges is with the Dow expansion that is happening here in the fort. We've had a huge
So that's
increase
from
in
planning and
industrial
development?
permitting,
Okay.
as well as a higher demand for residential as well. So we've seen a lot of increase there. And the other items that were impacting the user fees and charges were the DCC, more admissions, and Shell Theater had more admissions as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And just along that line, so the consolidated tangible capital assets, same thing. So would that be the reason for that? 'Cause I just look at the big variances and there's no explanation on the financial statement. I kind of like want to know a little bit more about that. So
Okay, for the contributed tangible
yeah, the
capital asset?
the contributed tangible capital assets. So that is also a huge variance there compared to what you budgeted for 2024.
Through your worship to Council Abatoya, the contributed TCA in 2024, it goes on a cycle. The process is that you developers will sign a development agreement. Typically, within about a year, they construct the infrastructure, and then about 2 years later, we take it on when ownership is transferred to the city. Because of that, there's different cycles that'll happen. And this year, it happened to be that all of a good chunk of the contributed TCA was underground infrastructure, as opposed to in last year, I believe it was almost all surface works, with the underground infrastructure significantly more expensive. We do our best to try and estimate that on an annual basis, but it comes down to a number of factors that are both within our control and outside our control, within the developer's control.
Okay, I've got Councillor Kelly, you're next.
Yes, thank you, and thank you everybody for presenting today. A couple quick questions. When I looked at the consolidated statement of accumulated surplus, so it's page 7 in the financial statement, it caught my eye the description restricted funds. I'm assuming you mean internally restricted funds?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, that yes, this is internally restricted funds used for operations, or internally restricted funds used for tangible capital assets. This just aligns with the verbiage that's used by the province in their financial information return.
Okay, thanks, Clayton. Do we actually have any funds other than maybe developer levies and I guess provincial grants, but loosely restricted, that are actually restricted in their use?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, we do have a section in our reserve summary. If I'm going to jump ahead a bunch to the bottom, to the second appendix B of the next report, includes a summary of the reserves. There's a section in there that is including contributions in lieu of municipal land reserves, youth, drug safety education, fire water line, perpetual care, and West Park Estates community enhancement reserves are all considered externally restricted, as well as offsite levies.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. One last quick question then. The next page on the statement, statement of changes in net financial assets. I just noticed under changes due to tangible capital assets, actually second line of numbers from the top, purchased additions were actually 26.3 million versus a budget of 20 million. Can you give me a Reader's Digest version of what happened there, please?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, the purchased additions would be your annual capital budget that's been approved by council, whereas the actuals in there include the carry forwards from the carry forward projects from prior years. So when councils, many of our projects, I think it's 25 of the projects that we had going on in 2024 were carried forward from prior years. So we'll continue to work on those projects. For example, the GRC is a multi-year project, neighborhood rehab, so on and so forth.
Perfect, understood. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you. That appears to be all of the questions that we have. So you have a request of council?
I get the easy part. Yes, I do. I recommend that council approve the 2024 consolidated financial statements as presented today.
Okay, thank you. What is the wish of council? Councillor Blizzard,
Sure, I'll make the motion.
go ahead.
I'll make a motion that council accept the 2024 consolidated financial statements as set out in Appendix A to the administrative report dated April 22nd, 2025, and authorize the mayor and any councillor to sign the financial statements on behalf of council as evidence of such approval.
Okay, thank you. The motion is open for discussion and debate. Not seeing any. Anything on close? You're good. Motion is closed. Please cast your vote.
Your worship, we're just waiting for Councillor Abertoye.
And that is carried unanimously, and we will continue on with 2024 Annual Financial Report and Surplus Proposal.
Coming up on the screen. There we go. All right, I will now go through the 2024 Annual Management and Financial Report. This report is presented on an unconsolidated basis, showing only the city's operations without the Fort Saskatchewan Library Board. So some operating highlights during the year. Of course, we had the Dow Canada expansion and of their net zero carbon integrated ethylene cracker and derivative site construction began, spurring increased industrial permitting from multiple industries and increased residential demand.
Can you move a little closer to the mic? I'm finding you're a little bit.
I'm a little bit soft.
Yeah.
All right. I'll move right over here. Completion of the new aquatics facility survey for the pool design to come out to the citizens for council to make decisions. Work was started on the fire master plan, which doubled response capacity in 2024 and includes a new fire hall plan coming forward in 2025. And the Heritage Trail Park project was completed in 2024. So, moving on to the operating results. The city had an operating budget surplus of $1.99 million in 2024, including $1.9 million surplus from general operations and $92,000 surplus from utility operations. The operating revenues were $2.97 million higher than budget in 2024. This was due to user fees and charges, utility user rates, investment income, and other revenues were all higher than budget in the year. However, the city did receive less than budgeted fines and penalties. Operating expenses were $360,000 higher than budget in the year. The overage in utility operation was due to increased water consumption during 2024. Other items were $619,000 higher than budget due to net transfers to reserves being higher than expected, due mainly to cash received in lieu of municipal reserve land. More details on the operating results of the city are available on page 4 of the annual report. Next, we're moving on to the capital program. So the 2024 capital program consisted of 15 new projects and, as Clayton referred to earlier, 24 multi-year projects that were carried forward from 2023. At December 31st, 2024, 16 of the projects had been completed, 21 were active, and 2 were on hold. The city spent $26.1 million on capital expenditures in 2024 and expects to spend $19.7 million to complete existing projects. More information on each of the city's capital projects can be found in Appendix 3 of the annual report. The city's financial position. Highlights of the annual changes for 2024 include an increase of $4.3 million in the net financial assets Since 2020, the city's financial assets have increased from 29 million to 42 million as a result of continued contributions to reserves, operating budget surpluses, and repayment of long-term debt. Please refer to page 10 of the annual report for more information on the net financial assets. Cash and cash equivalents were up 9.6 million. Investments were down 8.2 million as the city held funds in high-interest savings accounts for future cash flow needs. Government transfers receivable was up 1.3 million as a result of grant funding and court fines the city expects to receive in 2025. Deferred revenue is down 3.7 million due to government grant funding being used to fund capital projects throughout the year. A decline in long-term debt balances of 2.1 million that the city repaid in principal payments. The city's debt and debt service limits were 13% and 11% respectively. Financial reserves. So the city had uncommitted financial reserve balances of 46.4 million at the end of 2024 before the allocation of the operating budget surplus. The city's 2025 optimal balance for financial reserves is 49.7 million. So on the chart there, you will see the different areas. 3 reserves were under the optimal balance for 2025. The stabilization and contingency reserve were under 4.5 million. Project reserves were under 390,000. Infrastructure lifecycle reserve were under 8.2 million. 2 reserves were over their optimal balance. Specific purpose reserves were over by 1.4, and restricted reserves were over by 606,000. More information on the city's financial reserve is also included as Appendix B in the council report. So the operating budget surplus. When making recommendations regarding operating budget surplus, administration is guided by the city's allocation of operating budget surplus policy. This policy requires that the operating budget surplus from utility operations be allocated to the utility infrastructure and equipment reserve. Council approval is required in order to make the remaining allocations of the 2024 operating budget surplus. Administration recommendation for this allocation takes into consideration the uncommitted reserve balances at December 31st, 2024, 2025 optimal reserve balances, and planned contributions and withdrawals from reserves in 2025. So at this point, we are recommending that Council allocate the 2024 operating budget surplus from utility operations of $92,000 to the utilities infrastructure and equipment reserve, and that Council allocate the 2024 operating budget surplus from general operations in the amount of approximately $1,897,000 as follows: $900,000 to the financial stabilization and contingency reserve, $900,000 to municipal infrastructure and equipment reserve, and approximately $97,000 to the municipal operating projects reserve. At this time, if there's any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer those.
Great, thank you. And I will open it up for questions. I did have a question. So I read through the report and I'm not sure if I missed it or not. What made up the $1,897,000? I read through it and I was like, I'm not sure I actually saw that. Was it salaries? Was it contract service?
Your worship, Your worship, the most significant contributor to the surplus was the operating revenue increase. We were at 2.96 million over. There was savings. There's a number of items where we were up and down through operations on the expense side, but overall, there was only about $360,000 over spent on operations, and that related to higher than expected water sales through the utility program. The remaining, what brought us down, the remainder was transfers to reserves. So overall, the 1.89 or 1.98 is revenue.
Okay. I just wanted to double check on that to make sure that, we didn't have extra money that was in operating that, we could help out the next year. The other question that I had was your recommendation, 900,000 financial stabilization contingency, but 900,000 municipal infrastructure and equipment reserve. And I know you say it's not at its optimal balance, but why would you choose that one over the future capital operating reserve? Because we depleted that one so much for the JRC and fire services. So why wouldn't we have chosen that one?
Through your worship, we make a recommendation. First off, the future facilities operating reserve doesn't have an optimal balance of its own, so we wouldn't normally recommend putting funds into that that account. We would, if there was a choice, we would recommend putting into the capital projects between the two. But overall, we look both at the reserve categories as well as the individual reserves themselves. And the reserve category that the future facilities is in is still over its optimal balance by about 1.3 million at the end of the projected end of 2025. Whereas the infrastructure lifecycle reserves, and in particular the municipal infrastructure lifecycle and equipment, infrastructure and equipment reserve, are almost $6 million underfunded at this point, and we still expect that that optimal balance is going to increase as we continue to go through our asset management planning, optimizing the reserve balances required to continue to maintain operations going forward.
Okay. Well, I understand your answer. I can make my comment later, but I just want to say that if you're putting it into the infrastructure life cycle, we draw it down constantly. So how do you ever get to your optimal balance?
Through your worship to council, or sorry,
Mayor.
your worship, the optimal balance continues to move as the assets get closer and closer to retirement. In that case, and they adjust for ongoing replacement of those assets. What we're finding, the reason why it's continues to increase at this point, and why we're below where we're at, is as we've investigated, as we've updated our reserves over both the reserve contributions and the reserve optimal balances over the last several years, we've learned more about what the true replacement life cycles are of those assets. So we're playing catch up at this point.
Okay, I've got other people. Just for the young lady working at the back, when you're putting Councillor Kelly on, you can leave him on this side until I actually move him over, because otherwise then he's out of my cycle for who's going on. So just leave him back over there. So I'm going to take him off. You can put him back over there, okay? I can't get him off. Councillor Abatoye, you're next.
Thank you once again for your presentation. I think your report was pretty clear when I read it, but the only thing that jumped out at me was the 97,000 you're moving to municipal operating projects, because I see that after you move that money in, it reduces rather than increasing. And so when I go on and see the reserve summary after allocations, I see that you're overdrawing that reserve by a certain amount. So I'm just confused. How does that work? How do you overdraw a reserve? Is my question clear? Because I'm looking at your reserve summary allocations reports here, and it says that your uncommitted reserve balance before surplus is 379, but you're going to be withdrawing 429,000 in 2025. So I guess my question is, how are you overdrawing a reserve more than what's actually in there?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, I believe that at the time the 2025 capital budget operating budget was prepared, we knew that there was going to be a small surplus and there was an intent to top up that reserve back into a positive balance.
Okay. Okay. I think that's clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Catcher. No questions at this moment.
Okay. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. Just taking off from the mayor's line of thinking, going back to budget 2025, we had an omnibus motion that sought to eliminate future facility operating injections that were proposed for future aquatics facility as well as some ATE contingencies as well. So I guess why wouldn't we? I understand the policy and how it works and your rationale, but why wouldn't we pivot, given the recent decision that happened to go ahead with the aquatics facility, to kind of beef up the reserve for future facility operating instead of what you propose in this motion? I'm just looking for kind of a rationale and some insight.
Again, sorry, through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, again, that's certainly within council's span of control if they wish to make that choice or that decision. We again are guided by the existing policy and what's known within the policy, and we always refer back to the next year's budget when we're making these recommendations. But it certainly could be reallocated to the future facilities operating reserve as well, or instead of, if that was the wish of council.
Right, and that's kind of what I expected of the answer. Do we have just follow up? Short answer would be great. Like, do we have an extensive enough of a surplus policy to accommodate for maybe one-off items like we're seeing right now, or are you comfortable with the way it exists right now, and then just discretion of council then for changing allocation of surplus?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, if I'll just weigh in just to add to Mr. Norley's response. The reason why we chose the infrastructure lifecycle reserves because based on their comparison to optimal balance and also the urgency with which we replace replace capital assets in budget 2026, we felt that if we split the 900,000 to financial stabilization and 900,000 to infrastructure lifecycle, that was the group of reserves that were most in need of funding in terms of our policy. And so that's why that decision was made to go with this allocation.
Right, makes perfect sense. Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you. That appears to be all of the questions. So what is the wish of council? Councillor Abatoye.
Okay, I'll make the motion. I need to expand this thing. Okay, I'll make a motion that council allocates the 2024 operating budget surplus from utility operations in the amount of 92,000 to the utilities infrastructure and equipment reserves, and that council allocates the 2024 operating budget surplus from general operations in the amount of approximately 1.897 as follows: A, 900,000 to the financial stabilization and contingency reserve, B, 900,000 to the municipal infrastructure and equipment reserve, and C, approximately 97,000 to the municipal operating projects reserve.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. So first of all, I just want to really commend administration as well as our auditors for all of the work around the financial statements as well as the motion that's currently before us. I'm definitely in support of moving this surplus into the specific reserves because we see that we set a policy for setting optimal balances for certain reserves, and those two are the most impacted in that they fall short of their optimal balances. So I think it just absolutely makes sense. And as a municipality, we must always balance our budgets. And if we ever have a deficit, we know that we can go to the financial stabilization reserves to make sure that our budget is balanced. So I definitely support the motion. I think that's it's brilliant, honestly.
Okay, thank you. The motion is open for discussion and debate. I'm just going to weigh in because I want to make my comments. While I understand putting 900,000 to municipal infrastructure and equipment reserve, I guess my feelings are we took out, what, about $16 million out of the future operating one, or for the JRC. We also depleted it based on the doing the new fire hall services that we did. So we depleted it for all of that. But I would have been more comfortable with at least 50% of the infrastructure and equipment reserve going back into that to start planning to build that up again, because we've already had the conversation saying, yeah, we're going to come back with a plan, and we know we're going to have 1 or 2% a year so that we have that set up in the future years. So to me, when we just put it into the infrastructure and equipment reserve, yeah, we're building it up, but then 2026, you just said there's a whole bunch that's going to come out again. So you never do really get it built up to the optimal amount because you're continuing to pull out for that. So I don't know if I'm actually going to vote for this or not, but unless anybody wants to make any changes to the motion, I'll wait and hear it out. Well, push your button if you want to.
The motion. So
Go ahead,
yeah,
Councillor Nguyen.
I'll make an amending motion. Is that correct?
Yep.
To allocate. Sorry, I'm just thinking here. To allocate $900,000 to future facilities operating reserve, and I would actually seek advice from administration on which one would be preferred to be removed, either financial stabilization or municipal infrastructure, or would you like to split them? If that's, yeah, okay. So we can go 450,000 to financial stabilization, 450,000 to municipal infrastructure, and then that's correct. That's
Okay.
your line of thinking, and I'm okay with that. However, we want to discuss this.
Okay, so the amending motion would be to, how would the wording be? To change 900,000 from municipal infrastructure and equipment reserve to 400,000 and 400,000 to future operating. So we'll just give Jennifer a moment to do that, and while she's doing that, you can speak to your amending motion.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I am in a way indifferent to changing this. I believe if we take it out of one reserve contribution allocation source, then it's going to be, it's going to be saved and then removed from another. So in a way, to me, this might not make a large difference in terms of how we're moving these funds around, but I'd like to hear from council on other opinions. I thought when I'd read about the surplus proposal that we'd see something allocated for future facilities operations. So I'll wait to hear from the rest of council.
Okay, thank you. So we're dealing with the amending motion. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I'm not at all convinced that we should be reserving for future facilities to operate future facilities. The logic there eludes me. I know we started some time ago, years ago. I've never understood the logic, and in fact, I would argue against it. But I do have a question for administration. Once monies are allocated to reserves and reserves exist, it is my understanding that there is nothing prohibiting council from moving monies between reserves to meet something unexpected or something desired. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, that's correct.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I wasn't anticipating this debate, so hopefully I can get my comments out here well. I don't think I'm going to support the motion. When I think about why the Future Facilities Reserve was started, it was anticipation of a big facility like the aquatics facility. And then we had decided to use that money for the JRC instead, with the idea that we would likely borrow the money for the pool. So, sorry, I'm not gonna I'm gonna stutter on my thoughts here. So when we took that money out to do the JRC, it wasn't my anticipation that we would replace that money. And I think that what I'm understanding Mayor Ketcher was saying, and please correct me if I misunderstood you, is that we're going to be taking in money for the future operating in the next few years that we had anticipated pre starting to take that money. But we'd also budgeted for that money to actually go in. The money that we were taking in advance from the budget was supposed to actually go towards the project itself. That's how it is set up. So when we looked at the budget for the pool, there was money that was allocated in there to go toward the project that was coming from the money that we were taking in advance for the operating to have that when it came online. So I don't think that the idea was that that money was going to go into that future operating reserve. And I stand to be corrected by administration, but that's how I understood it at budget time. So when we reduced the amount of money that we were taking in advance for the operating, we were actually reducing the money that we had anticipated to have for a portion of that project. So, which is why I didn't want to take it out when we discussed that. So I think that what the administration is suggesting here is appropriate. It's appropriate places for those allocations to go, and I don't see a future purpose for that future facility reserve at this moment. So I would prefer to stay with the allocation that has been suggested. Hopefully that makes sense.
Rather than me trying to explain how we set it up and why we set it up through operating, Mr. Fleming, do you want to explain what we started many years ago?
Through your worship, I think at the time there was two things that kind of happened. Number one, we had anticipated that there might be an aquatics facility that would be built kind of back in the 2013, 2014, 2015 years. And in addition to that, there was, in those years, we had a significant amount of non-residential property tax revenue that came in at the same time. So the decision was made at that time to set that revenue aside as like an ongoing funding source. And eventually that would help to offset both the operating costs with the ongoing amount and the capital costs with the amount that actually goes into the reserve. The swimming pool, and then after that, two things never happened. The swimming pool didn't go forward, and decisions were made along the way to use those funds to offset or I guess reduce property tax increases over the course of, I think a lot of it was the last term of council did that. So this particular reserve, I can't remember the exact number, but the funding, like this reserve actually has a funding source, whereas some of these other reserves rely on the surplus as the funding source. So that's part of the reason why we kept the recommendation the way we have it.
That answer your question? Okay. Councillor Abatoye?
Yes, I do not support the motion. I do not support the motion because I believe that administration are the experts, and they've come before council to recommend that we move these funds to the Financial Stabilization Contingency Reserve as well as Municipal Infrastructure Equipment Reserve. And as Mr. Fleming just said, the source of funding for these two reserves is the surplus, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing what our policy says. So I do not support the motion because, as well, the reason we have these funds is to be able to respond for any reason that we need some sort of funding to be able to fund whatever it is, whether it's equipment or infrastructure, whatever. So I personally think that we need to stay within our policy as we've agreed, and I do not support this motion as it sits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blissard?
I'm actually okay with this motion. I don't think it hurts to divide it up, and as has been previously stated, council can reallocate if necessary, but I think to earmark some of the money towards a future facility that we know is coming won't hurt anything, so I'm okay with this motion.
Okay, thank you. Go to Councillor Nguyen to close.
Yeah, thanks. And I put the motion on the floor so that we could have a kind of discussion and see what came of it. I'm not extremely passionate about voting in favor of the motion that I presented here, so I'm actually not going to vote in favor of it myself. I think it would be a different conversation if it was a $20 million surplus and the possibilities of something like or the use of that type of money. But the way I see it as well, to echo some comments that were made, is that our financial team are the experts in this area, and I do believe maybe we all have a little bit better understanding of the reserve fund contributions and to our KPMG experts. Thanks for listening into the conversation.
Okay, thank you. The motion is closed. Please cast your vote on the amending motion only. And it's defeated 2-5, so we'll go back to the main motion on discussion and debate. Is there any further discussion and debate? If not, I'll go to Councillor Abatoye on close. Anything? Nothing. On the main motion is closed. Please cast your vote. And that is carried 6-1. All right, thank you. Okay, I think we're done with pretty well everybody, except not you, yes. Yeah. But we'll let everybody have a second just to, and thank you very much for being here in person today. All right, the next item is 7.1. It's an information item. And the purpose is to update council on bylaw C1025, which will be coming forward to us on May 13th. So Mr. Eamon, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Jeremy Eamon, CFO for the city, and I'm here just with a quick update to council on bylaw C10-25, the property tax bylaw, which provides for the collection of the 2025 property taxes. Administration is currently preparing bylaw C10-25 for inclusion on the May 13th, 2025 council meeting agenda for council's consideration of all three readings via the consent agenda. Normally, the property tax bylaw would be presented at this meeting. However, due to a council motion passed on March 25th, the agenda for this particular meeting has been limited to council's review and discussion of the fire station scoping study. Administration will be recommending council give three readings to the bylaw on May 13th to ensure that production and distribution deadlines for the property tax notices can be met in accordance with the MGA. It is anticipated that the tax notices will be distributed the third week in May, with property taxes due June 30th. The council report for May 13th will include adjustments to the municipal budget since it was approved by council on December 10th, as well as the updates to the final assessment growth figures, annual changes in the overall property assessments, and estimated property tax impacts for both residential and non-residential property owners. And that concludes my update of the property tax bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And because this is being asked to be done by consensus on May 13th, I will allow questions, but also any comments or feedback. Just remember to give everybody opportunities. Councillor Kelly, you're first.
Thank you. You answered already, Mayor Katcher, my first question, so I'll move on. I don't understand, quite frankly, Jeremy, a motion to amend the budget. We set the budget. We had actually a fairly lengthy discussion around how to, I guess, adjust the budget to make it perhaps more palatable. And one of the suggestions, as I recall it back then, was to just allocate some of the reserve money to reduce the budget. Administration recommended against that. And now essentially administration is recommending taking reserves to I think we need to have more than anyway, I'd like an explanation, and I guess you can note perhaps my frustration. Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly. So just off the top of my head, the only adjustment that I'm aware of that is required since the budget was adopted by council on December 10th is in relation to the automated traffic enforcement revenue. At that time, the budget, the way it was approved back on December 10th, the decision, there wasn't a clear decision yet on what the province was doing with automated traffic enforcement revenue. And so at that time, there was, I believe, a motion by council to put revenue and related expenses back into the budget. I believe when the budget was proposed to council, administration had removed all of the ATE revenue and related expenses, and there was motions by council to put some of that revenue back in. Our recommendation going forward on May 13th will be to adjust that ATA revenue to what we know now is what the province has basically confirmed that the restrictions on ATA revenue are fairly severe and that the revenue will be severely limited. And so that is the main adjustment that will be reflected in the spring budget. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Jeremy. We don't need to debate it. My recollection is slightly different, but I think we're essentially agree. In the report, and I'm reading here, the increase in property tax revenue over 24 included estimated property assessment growth of approximately 0.8 million. Are you talking actual assessment as in property tax dollars collected, or an assessment growth of 0.8 million?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly. So for the budget, the way it was approved on December 10th, the 0.8 million was management's or administration's best estimate of the 2024-25 assessment growth. The additional assessment growth that will be included in the spring budget is the actual growth over and above that estimate. And so there will be some slight additional growth that will be added to the budget now that the property assessments have been finalized.
Well, the report from Mike Krim indicated that residential assessment growth for 24 was 127 million and non-residential was approximately 100 million. So given that 227 million, how does that relate to 0.8 million in your comments? Just so I'm clear.
Okay, so through your worship to Councillor Kelly, so at the time the budget was approved in December, we didn't have the benefit of knowing the actual property assessment growth. So we estimated that in terms of the millions of dollars in residential assessment growth and millions of dollars in commercial and non-industrial and industrial assessment growth. So now Mike Krim and assessors have their finalized numbers. So the difference between those final numbers and what we estimated at the time of budget will relate to additional tax revenue. So it will be slightly more than the 0.8 million in tax revenue, if that makes sense.
Okay, and that was back to, thank you, Jeremy. That was back to my very first question. The 0.8 million is the growth in property tax revenue anticipated from the assessment base growth. When will council have a chance to know what the actual property tax revenue effect is from the 227 million in assessment base growth as reported by Mike Krim? Because I think it's important to understand that before we pass any motion on amending next year's budget, or the 25 budget, I should say.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, I agree with your statement, and it will be presented in the May 13th council report.
And Mayor Catcher, if I can continue, just one quick question of yourself then. I understand that the agenda for that particular meeting was anticipated to be restricted, but I do think that we're going to have time as a council to deal with this one particular issue just because we have to. Are you able to give council assurance that in fact the agenda will allow for that?
Anybody can ask for anything that's being put on a consensus item to be taken out of consensus and put on as an agenda item. So that's, any counselor has that right, and then it happens.
Thank you. Anticipate that it will, then, Mayor Catcher. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. That appears to be all of the questions. So thank you very much for the update on that. Okay, I'm going to move us right along. RCMP Annual Policing Priorities. Corrine Rayner.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Corrine Rayner. I am the Director of Protective Services, and I'd like to introduce to Council our Acting Detachment Commander, Staff Sergeant Scott Landy. We are here to present to you the annual policing priorities. Scott will present the annual policing priorities for the 2025-2026 fiscal year, along with a year-end report of the priorities from last year. Each year, the RCMP establishes annual policing priorities. These are proactive areas of focus that go above and beyond the regular response to calls for service. They are based on community input, emerging trends, crime data, and policing committee feedback. These priorities guide the RCMP's proactive efforts for the year ahead, helping to set goals and objectives with measurable outcomes. These priorities are important and are a key part of the RCMP's partnership with the city. They enhance local policing efforts by ensuring the community has a voice in policing, aligning police work with local concerns and expectations, creating accountability and transparency with specific objectives and targets, and they help the officers focus on proactive efforts. I'll now turn it over to Staff Sergeant Landy.
Thank you, Ms. Rayner. Thank you, Your Worship, Council. This is my first time before you, so I'm happy to be here. Taking over from Inspector Barry LaRock. It's been about 2 months, so I want to take this opportunity just to thank everybody and appreciate the work that Mr. Rayner has done. You guys do have a very good, cohesive working RCMP detachment with Protective Services and the RCMP. So this presentation is focused on the annual performance plans and the policing priorities. In summary of the work that Barry and his team did last year, I'll bring a lot of those highlights to it, and then discussing considerations of what we're going to do moving forward for next year's policing priorities. In light of that and consideration with, I think it's been a while before the RCMP has been with you, I did want to highlight some staffing. So there'll be a couple slides in here in our current staffing org chart, but those will be the focuses, the policing priorities. So just quickly and highlight, 20 to 42 positions are filled. That includes, we operate in a post model, which means there's municipal and provincial ones, of course. Of that, we have 5 members on medical leave, 1 suspended, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. We do have quite a bit of incoming members. So here's a little bit more of a breakdown of what you see. So our hard vacancies, we have 7 hard municipally funded vacancies. Those are just transfers out that we haven't been filled in yet. The 1 provincial resource is our sergeant that oversees the op support team. So that's our plainclothes, crime reduction, traffic, GIS. That member has been selected. It was out for promotion. That member has been selected. His name is Sergeant Will Hiscock. He'll be joining our detachment May 20th. That is going to be a very big change for our office because it's going to be able to give some guidance and supervision to the plainclothes side, which is my expectation. They're going to be doing a lot more of the proactive police work, the crime reduction, and traffic enforcement. The soft vacancies, there's a lot there. They vary back and forth. We have one member coming back from maternity and 1 member going off. So as you can see, we have 2 members that are maternity, 2 members that are medical leave. 1 is suspended with pay, and of course the 5. And then the other 2, we have 1 member that is a municipal that has been reassigned to G7. They had special skills that the G7 planning team requested. They were released to work with that programming. And then another member that recently has been put on administrative duties. We do, though, for the hard vacancies, we're excited. We have a member coming in from Grand Prairie. Their house is sold. We're just pending for their relocation, their arrival. We have an experienced police officer coming from the Edmonton Police Service. He actually has a remount with us. He had previous service with the RCMP in Lac La Biche, went to Edmonton City Police, decided he wants to come back to the Mounties, so we're happy to take him back. He starts May 6th with us. The only thing that I'm still working on is I'd like to be able to see him start quicker, operationally and roadable, like as a roadable member. Our organization wants to send him to a conversion training in Chilliwack, but really I think we should be able to work something out. Fingers crossed that I get him to start May 6th as a member here, being able to respond to calls. One of the other hard vacancies was a constable GIS position. That's our plainclothes that responds to, of course, the serious crimes. That went out to an external competition. I wanted to make sure that we had our best suitable candidates. Anybody internally within the detachment can apply, but we put it external. So we have 17 applicants to that position, which is exciting. I haven't received their names yet, but again, that will be hopefully something that can move pretty quick to get one of the hard vacancies filled. Under our T crew, we have a corporal that has been there. So a lot of the work that you'll see in the slide, honestly, is with Corporal Devin Lafreniere. It's tough when you're a 1-member unit with a big tasking of traffic and crime reduction. Under Corporal Lafreniere, there are 2 constables. Both of those positions are actually classified as traffic. We have one of those traffic positions that just closed with internal bulletin that we're trying to fill within the office. And then I'm going to try to get a second one reclassified to make it a little bit more reflective of our crime reduction work that will be happening. So that's the main point. Like I know that many of you likely had questions on staffing, so there might be some questions that we can answer and clarify by the end. But I wanted to make sure that we were full on where we're at on the resourcing. So under the traffic safety, throughout 2024, T Crew implemented several initiatives focused on improving traffic safety and reducing impaired driving in the detachment area. The year began with planning 3 Option 4 programs targeting key offenses contributing to serious collisions, stop sign red light infractions, distracted driving, speeding in school zones. The first program focused on stop sign and red light violations, with each initiative including 2 educational sessions aimed at educating offenders on the safety risks associated with these offenses. These programs were set up to continue throughout the year and are done in partnership with municipal enforcement. Additionally, traffic and crew developed a plan to target impaired drivers by conducting check stops at various locations throughout the detachment area. This proactive approach resulted in 5 criminal charges for impaired driving and 7 provincial sanctions related to impaired driving from April onwards. In the summer months, T Crew conducted 2 educational sessions related to stop sign red light violations, issuing 51 violations. Of those, 42 offenders attended one of the educational sessions, achieving an 82% success rate. And another Option 4 initiative focused on speeding in school zones was launched with educational sessions planned for the fall. During this period, 5 check stops were conducted. Approximately 200 vehicles were checked, resulted in 3 immediate roadside sanction cautions. 2 of those were fails. The RCP also charged 3 individuals criminally for impaired driving. A total of 13 immediate roadside sanctions and 9 cautions. In the fall, T Crew continued with educational sessions focusing on speeding in school zones, issuing 58 total violations. Of those 58, 43 offenders attend one of the educational sessions, which is 74% success rate. Another 5 check stops were conducted. Over 240 vehicles were checked. 1 impaired driver and 2 drivers receiving a 3-day suspension. In total, 11 sanctions were issued for impaired driving and 1 criminal charge was laid. That is the effort of all the detachment members coming together, but when I refer to T Crew, like I say, for the last year, that has actually been 1 member, being Corporal Lafreniere. So a second portion of the APPs from last year was the police and community relations. So our school resource officer and our community policing constables play a huge role in that. They're the forefront of our engagement with our community. CPPS held monthly meetings with the SRO and other stakeholders to address high-risk youth and develop strategies to manage prolific offenders. The Integrated Offender Management Program continued to play a vital role in connecting prolific offenders with resources aimed at reducing criminal activity. CPVS expanded fraud education efforts by partnering with the crime analysts to create Fraud Bingo, an initiative well received by seniors. They also held safety talks with pool staff regarding reporting procedures and collaborated with domestic violence unit regarding domestic violence awareness initiatives. CPVS took the responsibility of managing the virtual opioid dependency program at the detachment, updating procedures and documentation for that program. They also worked with the Family Violence Coalition, which hosted a learning series on domestic violence, created a public display at City Hall. I believe that's the picture in the middle, featuring a purple elephant to symbolize the elephant in the room, which was positively received by the community. As well, CPS partnered with the Boys and Girls Club to host a youth bike camp. And then, of course, beyond CPVS and SRO, our participation in Red Surge duties at Remembrance Day, Canada Day, throughout the holiday season, our members handing out candy on Halloween. CPVS attended farmers markets for recruiting and community awareness. They also put on domestic violence workshops within the community, discussing topics like court orders, immigration law, rights of employees experiencing domestic violence. Moving on to the school resource officer, they were heavily involved in schools, of course, throughout the year. They introduced a QR code for students in grade 9 to 12 to contact them directly, just easing the tensions of communicating with the police. They led several in-school initiatives, including Read in Week and recruiting efforts. They engaged classroom activities such as setting up forensic activities that they were able to host and show the kids some of our forensic capabilities. They played a key role in addressing disclosures of assaults, threats at schools. They participated in several community risk safety initiatives. I think that's the big one that I haven't even seen in my time is the SRO and their ease in their communication with the students. We have a lot of incidents where the school contacts our SRO directly and they have that established relationship. They participated in the grade 9 party program, helped plan and implement 2 grade 12 mock impaired collision scenarios before graduations. Again, they delivered a series of educational presentations, including impaired driving, anti-bullying, Halloween safety, and career planning to high school students. SRO and CPS have a new youth initiative working with community partners to target high-risk youth population, which has seen success with several youth. Last year has seen a decrease in the number of prose occurrences where youth had a negative interaction. And I do believe that is linked to that connection that the SRO and CPVS do have with our youth. So in the combined efforts of CPVS and the SRO throughout 2024 contributed to the success of numerous initiatives aimed at enhancing youth safety, preventing criminal activity, and fostering positive relationships between police and the community. Their work has had a lasting impact on the youth and broader community with an emphasis on education, engagement, and prevention. Moving on to crime reduction. Again, we could see in here some of the work that has been done. I think when you look at the lack of resources that we have in full disclosure throughout the year, that's where it's going to be. That's where we're going to see the hit is the proactive crime reduction. So that would be maybe an area that I would like to see more improvement in moving forward next year when we start discussing the upcoming annual policing priorities. But the detachment overall did the best that they could. It was very much focused on property crime and proactive policing strategy. They did create a dedicated fraud detection task queue, which was implemented. 20 cases reviewed in total in the third quarter alone on that. Again, under this umbrella with crime reduction, having that sergeant operations support NCO is going to tend to more results. It's just another police officer and supervision available. The crime trends and analysis. So a key aspect of policing, of course, we have our analyst that is able to give us real-time information and compare the trends over a year and really break down how we can address any crime trends that we're seeing within the city. In 2024, Fort Saskatchewan reported 2,604 total criminal code offenses. That reflected a 2% increase from 2023. Property crime saw mixed trends, with theft under 5,000 increasing by 10%, while fraud cases surged by 30%. In regards to violent crime indicators, it showed a 22% rise in assault cases and 36% in uttering threats. Compliance checks and patrol data. In 2024, 39 compliance checks, which resulted in 8 breach charges. Those are just offenders out on any various of court orders, so we're proactively targeting them. Monitoring prolific offenders remains a key strategy, with 10 high-risk individuals being actively tracked. That is a big part of crime reduction, is knowing who our most prolific offenders are and not then targeting them, right? If they're out in the community, we need to be aware of that. We need to know where they are and send those resources to them in an effort to try to do prevention. Patrol visibility, well, was a major focus. 11 of our marked units covering 323,994 kilometers throughout the year. That's a lot of miles within our units, and that shows that our members are out there. We have a big area to cover, including the city and the rural component, but our members are out there and they're being visible. So there's a graph that reflects some of the trends and where we're at. I do caution when we look at graphs, because of course some things are so variable. When you look at 103% increased general mischief, that can be affected by clerical changes in our scoring, which would be what mischief is. That's exactly what those are the discussions we've had on how we're scoring our mischief offenses. But then also crime trends, theft of cattle converters, property crime increase in 38%, that can be reflected in those issues, right? Increase of population from 2020 to 2024, the crime stats will of course go up. So in summary, the Fort Saskatchewan RSP successfully met most policing targets that were set in 2024. There are some areas of improvement that we can identify and we can work on. Looking ahead, I'm a big proponent of intelligence-led policing. My background is in crime reduction, where we can target the most prolific offenders. That's where I actually know the corporal, the sergeant coming in, Will Hiscock. I previously worked with him, so I'm excited for him to come. But really, intelligent-led policing, using our analytics to reduce crime within our communities. Of course, we remain committed to refining strategies based on emerging trends, policing efforts, and the needs of the community. So the 2025-2026 policing priorities remain much the same. This was in consultation with the community, our town hall, our survey that went out. Crime reduction, primarily property crime, police visibility, community relations, and traffic safety are what we're proposing as the core policing priorities. Underneath each of those ones, we will come up with policing initiatives that are addressed to focus on those policing priorities. And that is my presentation. So I certainly am open to questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. Councillor Blizzard, you're first.
Thanks for the presentation. And I really believe that anyone that is working is trying their best. So when I say the next thing, don't take it personally, because I think anyone on the job is doing their best. But, you were showing, is it 21 out of 34 positions are only being manned? And I know when we talked about it last fall, I think we were looking at most of the time it's 26, 27, which already looks low. So, and that's not your fault. I mean, it can happen if somebody's sick or has issues. But is there any contingency plan? Like, what if, and this could be anywhere, any RCMP detachment, what if everybody said, that's it, I'm done? Like, is there something in place so a community, all of a sudden we don't have, like, there's 5 officers, we don't have enough to man 2 shifts? Is there plans?
Good question, Councillor Bridger, through your worship. That is a good question. we obviously are the RCMP. We're the contract for the provincial police service, so we have resources all over. Just on the weekend, we had the fires at the Ukrainian village. That was our detachment area. Strathcona County, we were able to attend. Should there be calls that happen, we have our real-time operational center. They could see every police officer in the province of Alberta on mapping, and we have the closest car. So if we're out in Lamont County, but maybe Two Hills is actually the closer one to respond. So they're going to dispatch them if it's a priority one call. So yes, immediately there is the surge capacity. We're in the benefit of the Edmonton hub area, right? We have a lot of large detachments here. That request would go out and that request would be filled. Without a doubt. We're moving into fire season where some of our members will be deployed elsewhere. We also have G7 coming up, which isn't going to necessarily be a big ask on the city, but at the provincial side. So yeah, but even outside of the province, we see it on major events where if there's something that happens in Saskatchewan, we send our resources there. So certainly there is surge capacity. To address even on where we're at, we are having obviously recruiting is been a struggle, right? We have 3,000 applicants just for the province of Alberta alone. So things are coming up. They are improving. That's still before screening. We still have our standards, and about 50% of those are getting screened out. And then when they go through depot, they're going to go to Eastern Alberta District, Western Alberta District before they come into Central Alberta District as more of a ideal and preferred posting. So we're getting the ones that are up in Fort McMillan, and now we're having them transfer into us. So we get the benefit of having experienced members typically come here.
Yeah, and I don't question the quality of when we get our members. I guess, what I was asking was, I guess, the deployment for an emergency. But what happens if you are just short? We normally, and I can't remember what the numbers were, but you have 6 on a shift and 2 are sick now. Is there something where you call in, like when teachers, my daughter's a teacher, they have somewhere where they call to get a backup? Does RCMP do that? Is there somebody that gets called in so that we fill the shift and have the ranks here?
Certainly, we do monitor that because then, of course, that member's coming in at an increased cost of double overtime. So it's that balance. What we do here in the fort, we've been running it quite well since I've been back since I've been here. Inspector LaRocque just moved it back to a 4-watch system, and they do have the adequate coverage on that 4-watch system. But should the watch commander be in a need of calling in an additional member, then they put that out there. They can bring somebody in on overtime. And that's not just isolated to members within Fort Saskatchewan. Members from anywhere can pick up that overtime shift.
Okay, and just a note, when we're at 21, even if we pay 2 people or 3 people double time, we're still below what we've approved in budget.
Yeah. Those are ongoing questions that I keep putting forward. Since I've been here, I've been really trying to get our positions filled, trying to work on reclassifying some of the coding so that we can, for example, the traffic position that I talk about. Our staffing was reluctant to fill that traffic position because if we're going to put an emphasis on traffic, well, then we should be okay on our frontline resources, right? So if I can reclassify some of those so I can get people in positions to do the job that we need them to do, 100%.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the hard work you do keeping our community safe, and welcome. And I said that to you before, but welcome. My first question is, so one thing I was looking forward to seeing was a report on commercial vehicle inspection. I know that's something that we've been very alarmed by the numbers, and I was kind of looking forward to the numbers this year to see how that compares to the previous year. So do you have any report, anything to say about that?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, that's a municipal enforcement function, and I don't have any updates as of yet. We do have a new officer that's in that position and is right now taking his training to become a CVSA Level 1 inspector.
Okay.
Those inspections are still happening. We do have another officer that is doing that work and doing the inspections. We have 2 big joint operations that are going to be happening coming up here in the spring, one in the fall where we have the Alberta Sheriff's, Edmonton Police Service, and Strathcona County that assist us. So that work is ongoing and still a major priority for municipal enforcement.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, because I see traffic safety as one of the priorities, so I thought that was something that was very important. So I appreciate your response. My second question is just going back to your priorities. So it seems seems like you have the exact same priorities from last year. The only difference is your number one has become number three and your number three has become number one. So my question is, what are you going to do differently this year?
Yeah, Council Abertoir, through your worship, that is exactly what I assessed. And when I built the APPs for the coming year, I had those conversations about. I actually think you've had the same priorities for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
There can be something said about assessing the trends to see where we're at, but internally we have to look at how we can do things differently, right? If we have the same policing priorities year after year after year without seeing successful marks, what can we do differently? So some of that breaks down to resourcing. Or when you're operating with 21 police officers, the proactive side does diminish because you're just busy being a first responder and responding to calls of service. So kind of transitioning our thoughts, that side is always going to be our priority, but we have to make sure when we talk about crime prevention and crime reduction with property crimes, we have the ability to have specialized police officers in plainclothes environment doing unconventional policing techniques, surveillance, judicial authorizations, really targeting the prolific offenders. When I say intelligence-led policing, that is not only information from our analysts, but you need to have that connection with the community. We have to have our connection with our confidential informants telling us, and we have to build investigative packages, right? Of those, police community relations, that's always something that we're going to do. We can say it's going to be a priority, but we're always going to be in the community and a mainstay in it. So I see the crime reduction and the property crime as being a real focus, getting the right people into positions and getting them motivated to do good work. So when I come to you next time, I can show you a result of search warrants, right? Here's a search warrant that we attended. We recovered this amount of stolen vehicles. Kind of one part that was in the survey that isn't really reflected in the AP, the 3 core policing priorities is persons crime. Well, persons crime is kind of hard to attend to. And a lot of that comes through domestic violence, right? So we can create awareness. So I kind of see that falling into police visibility and community relations is preventing persons crimes by doing community engagement, right? And of course, whenever somebody says an assault or a robbery, that is going to immediately jump to their of course, that's a priority in our community, right? And then traffic. I also see that a little bit as intelligence-led policing. If we have a dedicated traffic member, they're out in the community, and we can lend them to targeted enforcement as well. They can be tending to the hot spot areas where we see an increase in property crime and being visible in our community. So I do hope next year when we're before you that we can maybe assess and we can kind of shuffle some of these priorities, and that will give us as well as a trend really for the last 4 years on where things are at.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and nice to see you both. Last week at the Policing Committee, Minister Rayner, you presented that municipal enforcement is fully staffed for the first time in a very long time, which is a huge win for our community. But I'm just wondering in what ways that can help when the vacancies are so low. Is there anything that ME can help with, allowed to help with, that can, help when the pressure is on?
Through your worship to Councillor Macon, yes, the municipal enforcement team do augment some of the things from the RCMP. So they recently in the last year started executing provincial warrants. And so we've developed some processes there, and they do assist RCMP and are the main, traffic enforcers in the community, but they do partner with available officers on traffic enforcement as well. Of course, attending all of the bylaw calls for service. They definitely will assist. I think our assistance to the RCMP is over doubled in the last year too within our statistics. So RCMP will call upon municipal enforcement to assist with traffic and collisions and things like that. Our MES officers are actually usually first on scene to collisions now. That's a new service level that they've started doing as well, to take that away from the RCMP still and investigate that collision, but they are dispatched right away to those things as well. So there's definitely things that they assist with.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Staff Sergeant Landy, I'm just wondering, where do you see the organization in a month? Like in a month, I know that you kind of threw out a few dates for some of those positions, but say a month from now, where do you see the detachment being vacancy-wise?
Council will make it through, your worship. A month, we'll have the two new positions being the sergeant and the constable that's coming in. The constable that's coming in from Edmonton City Police is actually going to be going into our 2025 resource, so we're going to have a member there. By the end of this summer, I anticipate we'll be getting some of those hard vacancies close to being full. I have members identified for every single vacancy. I'm just waiting for them to be posted. So, for example, I have a member coming from Nanton. Nanton's a harder to staff detachment, and it's a provincial resource, so we're waiting for their backfill before they can get transferred to us. But honestly, by the fall, August, the September, I anticipate the hard vacancies will be full. I don't have any members transferring out, knock on wood, maybe with the exception of a promotion out. And where we're sitting at a soft vacancy, while that number always fluctuates, I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we're seeing where our soft vacancies are going to be pretty consistent for a bit. So yeah, I am optimistic that things are improving here.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Staff Sergeant, I want to tell you that for the last 7 years, I've always enjoyed and been appreciative of the professional and way that yourself today and your predecessors have presented to council. I've always appreciated the candor and the information. And like Councillor Blizzard, I truly do appreciate the RCMP. The concern, though, and you touched on it immediately in your comments, is the vacancy rate. And while I appreciate your optimism, my recollection is that for 7 years or now 8 years, I've had these reports come to council. And my recollection is that we've run pretty much 25% vacancy rate over the last 7 or 8 years. And that's my recollection. Now we're at 29%. I'd like to better and every time that number is discussed, there's qualifiers put in, just like you did within the last 5 minutes, that you're optimistic. And I appreciate that. But what I'd like to do is truly have a better understanding of what our vacancy rate is in the detachment. So a question of yourself or Corrine, how difficult would it be to go back for 2 or 3 years and simply say on the 15th of every month, write down the members active in the detachment, just a number, so that we can get a 3-year listing. I'm not looking for a PowerPoint presentation and anything elaborate. I'd like to know what the vacancy rate is monthly at a specified date historically for the last 2 or 3 years, so that I can get a better understanding of actually how this is working. Is that possible, and would it be difficult?
Ms. Rayner.
Your worship, through to Councillor Kelly, yes, that's possible. We did provide the same information that you're speaking of, so I have that, and I'll get K Division to update that for us. Typically, we do see a 4 to 5 member vacancy rate, so about a 15% vacancy rate. This last 2 years has been definitely an increase to that, like you've said. So we can certainly provide that to you. Yes.
And just curious, you referenced K Division. Would we not have within our community data readily available regarding officers on duty on a monthly or daily basis?
Your worship, through to Councillor Kelly, it is tracked through our K Division. They have software systems where they track the in and outs of all of our members. So that is the best source of information that we would get it from.
Okay, whichever is easiest. Do you, either Mr. Fleming or yourself, do you need a council motion for that, or could you do that and provide that to council sometime in the near future?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, we can provide that to you. I don't need a motion for that. It's just an information.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. I think the statistics introduced by the staff sergeant early in his comments support the feeling of council that we would like to have 34 or somewhere close to 34 active officers. And And I know that when you're down to 24, things are being missed or you just don't have the manpower to deal with things. And I do think that that's an issue. So if we could get the data, Karina, I'd much appreciate it. And once we've got it, maybe council can have another discussion, and we'll wait till that time. And again, Staff Sergeant, thank you for your comments. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. I'm the next one in the speaking order. So a couple questions. Let's talk about the prolific offenders. So are these people who have been caught, taken in, and then released as part of the catch and release, and then it's up to you to have to follow them around?
Yes, Your Worship. That's kind of the situation where we're at, particularly with property crime offenses, that they are quite often released through the courts. So they are repeat offenders, usually out on numerous conditions, numerous charges before the courts. Those are repeat offenders, yeah. Based off a harm score and what their offense is, the frequency for offenses, a bunch of trends that our analysts can assess and identify those offenders for us.
Okay. Is there so many, if you're caught 3 times, you can keep them, or is it just, they just keep getting thrown back into society?
Yes, Your Worship. Again, depending on the scale, the severity of crime, quite often if they have a pattern of failing to comply with court orders, you're more likely to get them held in custody. But yes, they go before the courts, they're released with a court date, and they're out quite often reoffending again.
Okay. I want to talk about the removal of the automated traffic enforcement cameras. So without having them now, I imagine we have the statistics that say how many tickets have been issued for speeding through the intersection and how many are for red lights. So I imagine we have those statistics. So without having people there now to enforce that, intersections are really difficult. So what's the plan now that those are being removed?
Through to Your Worship. So the plan that I have is we're updating our traffic safety plan. We'll be putting forward a request for another CPO officer to do some more traffic work and commercial vehicle enforcement in 2026. So that's one. It's increasing the conventional traffic enforcement that is done. And it's focusing on uniformed officers out there on the roads. And as Staff Sergeant Landy has indicated, he is making sure that that traffic position gets staffed so that they can assist as well on the RCMP side. I do plan and have purchased some speed display signs to put down along the highway corridor. That's where we lost all of the cameras. So that is another plan. So we're also focusing on a Vision Zero Drive Safe campaign that is coming. So there's lots of different plans in place to help us start looking at other avenues of focusing on traffic safety and conventional enforcement, and working with our engineering department as well on the traffic safety system.
Okay, thank you. I think it's going to be a real challenge. Last question that I have, and it deals with the staffing. A number of years ago, a lot of years ago, so when I became the mayor, we had the same questions, and we were down to 12 boots on the ground, and we were like, where is everybody? And it was exactly the same conversation that we had. Back then, I believe we had 2 surplus to establishment. Was it 2 or 3?
2.
Just 2. So, and I know I ask this every budget, but we ask the question, okay, if we were to bring more surplus to establishment on, would that not resolve part of this? And I know you keep telling me, well, if we ever had 100%, we'd go over budget. But would that not be part of the fix?
Through Your Worship, to Your Worship, yes, that is something that a lot of the municipalities will do, is over ask for what we are needing within our community, and then we budget according to what our budget would be. So that's definitely an option for us to request more officers to help us with the vacancy rates. However, it's that game of balancing the thing that where all the municipalities are doing that. So certainly more officers on the roster would help us with vacancy rates, and then we would manage within our budget, the numbers that we have for sure.
Okay, and I thought I just heard you say you're asking for another position in 2026, so that's in the addition to the 2025 and 27 that was approved?
Through your worship, we are asking for another municipal enforcement officer.
Okay.
And then the RCMP have a request that has been approved in principle for 2027. Staff Sergeant Landy will come to council in August to discuss the multi-year financial plan and future requests for staffing.
Okay, great. I look forward to that. Okay, thank you. That looks like all of the questions. So I know we've got we've got a motion for that. So we actually have a motion that we have to deal with. Councillor Macon?
I'll make the motion that council adopt 3 strategic priorities for April 2025 to March 2026 as outlined in the RCMP annual performance plan year-end report, being crime reduction, property crime, police visibility, community relations, and traffic safety.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I will. These priorities were considered thoroughly through conversation with RCMP, Municipal Enforcement, Policing Committee, the public, our residents and businesses input, and I believe that they are a reflection of what the community is looking for.
Okay, thank you very much. It's open for discussion and debate. I don't think there's going to be too much. All right, but I thank the Policing Committee and yourselves for bringing this forward. I think you're going to have a lot of interesting times with traffic safety in the next year, because when I read Facebook and people talk about the fact that those devices aren't going to be on the highway, that leaves me a lot of concern that people, even those who are good will adhere to the speed limits and stopping, but those who won't, leaves me a lot of room for concern. So I wish you good luck on that one. All right, anything on close?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, on the motion is closed. Please cast your vote. Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Now I know we've got the next one, but it's No. No, we've been asked for a break, so a comfort break. So we'll just take 10 minutes. So it's 3:46, so we'll be back at 4 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, the time is 4 p.m., so we will return from recess and continue on. We will begin with 9.1, Bylaw C5-25, Policing Committee Bylaw for 3 readings. Ms. Rayner.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Corrine Rayner, the Director of Protective Services for the City. I'm here to present an update to the Policing Committee Bylaw and request 3 readings. The Police Act and Police Governance Regulations of Alberta are the pieces of legislation that provide the framework for policing in the province of Alberta. There have been changes to municipalities to create policing committees that took effect on March the 1st, where municipalities with a population of over 15,000 shall have a policing committee. Smaller municipalities and rural areas will now have the opportunities to sit on regional policing committees and ensure that their voices are heard. The purpose of the changes the province has made is to enhance civilian governance of the RCMP and to ensure that communities have a say in their policing priorities. Fort Saskatchewan has a well-established policing committee of over 30 years and is compliant with the requirement for a municipality over 15,000 to have a policing committee. The duties and responsibilities and functions of the policing committee for the purpose of our bylaw have been listed and just reference the new legislation. That way we don't have to constantly update our bylaw when those pieces of legislation will change. So we've shortened up the bylaw a little bit by doing that. I'll go through all of the duties and the policing committee structure and highlight what has changed within the bylaw. The responsibility to oversee the administration of the Municipal Police Service Agreement. This has not changed. This was in the previous legislation and will not change for the Policing Committee. They do this portion of their duties through the reports that the detachment commander gives through the Policing Committee meetings and also in helping set those policing priorities. Committee members are requested to take an oath of office. This is unchanged from previous legislation. They are to represent the interest and concerns of the public and of council to the officer in charge. This is also unchanged. Developing an annual plan of priorities and strategies for municipal policing in consultation with the officer in charge. That is also unchanged and still remains part of their duties. The development of a community safety plan in collaboration with a local police detachment. This is a new requirement, and we are still unsure what the province is looking for here. They haven't released the template to what that community safety plan will look like, but that will be a body of work that the policing committee is going to be working on in the next year. The policing committee is to report annually to the minister or on request on the implementation of and updates to programs and services to achieve the priorities of the police service. This is a new duty assigned to them. They also assist with the selection of the officer in charge, which is unchanged from the previous bylaw. And there has been a removal of the public complaints director role within the provincial legislation. So that is new. That role is taken out as the RCMP do have a third party organization that oversees all public complaints to the RCMP, and it is called the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission. So they already have a body that oversees their public complaints. The structure of the policing committee has changed a bit. It has now gone back to 7. So making up a policing committee shall consist of no fewer than 3 members and no more than 7 members. The composition, it used to be you could have up to 12 members, and I recently had council update the bylaws so that we could have 9 members on our policing committee, and now we've gone back to 7. So we recently did have 2 committee members who resigned from the committee and we didn't fill those positions, so we are compliant with that aspect of the bylaw. All members must pass an enhanced security check. This is new, and it's something that the government of Alberta will do for each policing committee member, just to do and ensure that there is an enhanced security clearance for them. The term of office has not changed. It stays with, can be a 3-year term or no less than 2 years, and we currently have a 3-year term. the members can serve 2 consecutive terms up to 9 years on the policing committee. A member who is the chief elected official is not eligible to be elected to the chair or vice chair of the policing committee. That is unchanged within the legislation. And there are the advisory non-voting positions, so the RCMP officer in charge, director of protective services, municipal enforcement supervisor, and our protective services coordinator all sit in non-voting positions on the policing committee. The protective services coordinator is there as the recording secretary and does all of the administrative functions for the policing committee, so that has not changed. Something that is new is that the minister can appoint people to our policing committee. So we can have up to 2 provincial appointees on the policing committee going forward. So far, I have not heard anything from the province as to whether they are appointing anyone to our policing committee. And these appointees could be serving with remuneration. So currently our policing committee are volunteers, they serve with no remuneration. It might be something that we have to revisit in the future, and I'll monitor that and bring that forward through a budget request if need be. There are no financial implications to the amendments of the policing committee bylaw. With the new responsibilities and creation of a community safety plan, the policing committee is looking at increasing their annual budget, and I will bring forward a request through the budget process to do that. We're still unsure of what that community safety plan entails and whether an outside consultant will be required to help us complete that work. So when I know more about that, we will include that within our budget process as well. That concludes the changes to the policing committee bylaw, and we are recommending 3 readings of the bylaw.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll go to questions first. If anybody has any questions. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, that's kind of interested in, I guess, a relationship with the Office of the Minister and how this could evolve. Question is just on the presentations, the annual presentations to the Minister. That's, I don't know how many policing committee bodies there are in the province of Alberta. It seems like it would be a substantial amount of time and effort. Would this be sort of like maybe a regional representation, geographically throughout Alberta, or is this actually every single policing committee being required to present to the Minister?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, it is just a request for a report. So so we would just use our policing committee annual report, I think, that we give to council and provide that to the Minister unless they request any further types of information.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Not seeing any other questions. What is the wish of council? Go ahead, Councillor Nguyen.
Just get the right one this time. So I'll move that council get first reading to Policing Committee Bylaw C5-25.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it?
Not too many comments. I think Corinne gave a very comprehensive report to us, and look forward to the ongoing work of the Policing Committee as governed under our bylaws.
Okay. Thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. Not seeing anything on close?
Nothing on close.
I'll close the motion for first reading. Please cast your vote. That is carried unanimously. You can proceed.
So move that council give second reading to Policing Committee Bylaw C5-25.
Thank you. Anything further to speak to it?
Nothing further.
All right, thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. Not seeing any.
On close.
I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote.
That's quick.
That is carried unanimously, and you can present it for unanimous consent.
I move that council give unanimous consent to proceed with third reading to Policing Committee Bylaw C5-25.
Thank you. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. That is carried unanimously, and you can continue with third.
I'll move that council give third reading to Policing Committee Bylaw C5-25.
Thank you. Anything to speak to it?
Just thanking all the volunteers and the coordination efforts between all parties involved in the policing committee in Fort Saskatchewan, and thank them for their service.
Great. Thank you very much. It's open for discussion and debate. Not seeing any. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Great. All right, we're going to move right along to bylaw C9-25 for Roseburn Area Structure Plan. We have Scott Perch presenting, along with Cherie and Craig Thomas. Welcome.
Your Worship, members of Council, my name is Craig Thomas, Director of Planning and Development. I'm also joined by Sri Shinde, Manager of Current and Long Range Planning, as well as Scott Purich, Planner here with the City. So we're here today to introduce the Roseburn Area Structure Plan for Council's consideration of first reading. And I'll turn it over to Scott, who will walk you through the presentation.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so good afternoon, Your Worship and member of Council. My name is Scott. I'm a planner here with the City, and I will be giving you a brief presentation on the bylaw C9-25 to adopt the proposed Roseburn Area Structure Plan. So to begin, in August 2023, City Administration received an area structure plan application that encompasses roughly 250 hectares of land located south of South Fort Meadows neighborhood, east of Highway 21, west of 92nd Street. I would note that 92nd Street is included in the area, and north of the city's southernmost boundary, or Township Road 542. The ASP area encompasses an entire section of land, or 4 quarter sections. However, I would like to note that while the ASP is for an entire section, the plan focuses on the northeast quarter section, highlighted in orange. This quarter section is owned by the ASP applicant. The remaining quarter sections are designated as future plan area, which is highlighted in green, and are owned by non-participating landowners. As these future plan areas are planned, there will need to be amendments to this area structure plan to reflect the planning for these areas. So the ASP gives high-level direction to the future plan areas in accordance with the city's servicing design briefs for the annexed areas. The northeast quarter section, or the planned area, includes agricultural lands, homesteads, a man-made dugout, some minor wetland areas which are non-crown claimable, and an existing tree stand on the homestead. So first, I want to start with an overview of the approval process and the next steps. So currently we are at the ASP stage. The ASP is developed as per the guidelines of the terms of reference for area structure plans and neighborhood structure plans, and must align with the municipal development plan. An area structure plan typically includes information such as the sequence of development, the land uses proposed for the area, the density of population proposed for the area, the general location of major transportation routes and public utilities. Technical studies are also undertaken, which include transportation impact assessment, environmental and historical assessment, biophysical, geotechnical investigation, and servicing design to ensure suitability of the land for the development. So an area structure plan is a statutory plan and must be approved by council by giving 3 readings, and a public hearing must be held. We are currently at the first reading of the area structure plan, and once the area structure plan is approved and adopted, the next step is to create a neighborhood structure plan, or NSP, which is also to be developed as per the terms of reference for area structure plan and neighborhood structure plans. The adoption of an NSP will not be permitted unless an ASP has been adopted for the area, which the NSP is proposed. Council is the approving authority for NSPs, and an NSP is approved as an extension of the ASP. So an NSP is typically a more detailed subplan within an ASP, focusing on individual neighborhoods. This can include details such as local road networks, lanes, blocks, more accurate sizes, and configurations of parks and open spaces, as well as the detailed servicing and staging. After the approval of the NSP, redistricting applications are submitted, and once approved by council, administration can process applications for subdivision and development. So the area circled in black is the next step once and if council gives third reading to this bylaw for the ASP. So next I want to discuss the concept plan included with this proposed ASP. The purpose of this map is to provide a visual representation of the proposed land use pattern, including residential areas, commercial zones, parks, open spaces, and key infrastructure. So the ASP envisions the Roseburn area as a predominantly residential neighborhood. The ASP will accommodate approximately 11,200 residents with close to 4,500 dwelling units. That's for the entire area. Whereas the northeast quarter section will be home to approximately 3,100 residents and approximately 1,250 dwelling units. A variety of housing options are proposed, including singles, semis, townhomes, apartments, and a new shallow lot high-density housing form. First, I would like to bring your attention to the land use layout. As you may note, the largest land use is in light yellow, which is low-density development. Next is the slightly darker yellow, which highlights the areas designated for street-oriented low-density development. This area will allow for slightly greater density and is largely located along major transportation routes. Next is the medium density, which is highlighted in the salmon color. This use is located south of the proposed school site at the intersection of collector roads and within the neighborhood node. We also have high-density shallow lot housing designated in orange. This area is designed to accommodate a unique housing form consisting of semi-detached homes with separate upper and lower units, each with their own entrance. We will also have regular high-density residential and neighborhood commercial development designated within the neighborhood node area as well. A neighborhood node should include higher density housing and commercial opportunities, acting as a gathering place for the community. This can be seen as areas with hatching on the plan. Adjacent to the neighborhood node is the stormwater management pond, which will act to enrich the area and accommodate walking trails. So next, focusing on the northeast quarter section again, I want to bring your attention to the orientation of the roads. The quarter section is designed with one east-west collector road, two north and south collector roads, and is bounded by 3 arterial streets on the north, east, and south. Roundabouts are to be utilized at most intersections of the collector roads and arterial roads to ensure traffic calming, safety, and efficient movement. The overall road network aligns with the MDP direction as it supports the creation of a modified grid. I would also note that the road network was developed around the city's servicing design brief for the annexed lands. So next is the distribution of parks and open spaces. Parks of various sizes are distributed throughout the plan area, including a future school site along the north end of the plan area. The location of parks is consistent with the MDP, as green spaces are largely located along collector roads, and the location of small-scale parks are within 5-minute walking distance of residents. I would also note that the existing tree stand identified earlier is not being retained, as the technical reports noted the difficulty in maintaining the tree stand. Many of the trees would need to be replaced and would be unrealistic to retain due to the grading and servicing that would occur with the ASP. The map shows multi-use trails along arterial and collector roads, as well as throughout the parks around the stormwater management area. These trails are designed to support safe and convenient active transportation for pedestrians, cyclists, and other users. The trails link residential areas, parks, school sites, and commercial areas, ensuring that all key destinations are easily accessible. And I would like to bring to your attention how the trails connect to the existing systems located on the north end of the ASP area there, kind of connecting into the South Fort Meadows. Additionally, an enhanced pedestrian multi-use corridor is planned for along 92nd Street. This corridor will be developed in stages as the project progresses from the north to the south. So next, I want to discuss the staging plan included with the ASP. The purpose of this map is to illustrate the recommended sequence of development within the Roseburn ASP area, ensuring orderly and efficient growth. The map shows the conceptual order of development stages, starting from the northeast and extending south and west. This sequence is designed to maximize efficiency and minimize disturbance to existing land uses. So stage 1, development begins in the northeast portion, including the road connecting from South Fort Boulevard at Greenfield Link and initial construction of the stormwater management facility. Stage 2 development continues west from stage 1. This stage also includes the west entrance and collector and dedication of the school site municipal reserve. Stage 3 development proceeds south, culminating in the connection of the internal collector roads and development of the central mixed-use neighborhood node. This stage includes a wide range of housing options and completion of boundary arterial roads to the northeast quarter section. This slide speaks to the ASP and its conformance with the planning documents. So the ASP conforms with the MDP policies and objectives. The ASP is located in the area that is designated as part of future urban areas in the MDP. So neighborhoods in the future urban area are designed as a place that meets the diverse needs of its residents and offers a high quality of life. The ASP includes a variety of housing types, aligning with MDP policies, which emphasizes diverse housing types to meet the needs of different ages, incomes, and household sizes. The ASP ensures that parks and open spaces are distributed throughout the community, with all residents within a 5-minute walk of a park, aligning with the MDP policies, which emphasizes the importance of accessible and well-distributed parks and open spaces. And the ASP encourages street-oriented development with active interfaces aligning with the MDP policies. Finally, the ASP is designed to implement the MDP's vision for complete communities through detailed planning. This includes ensuring neighborhoods are designed to be walkable, safe, and welcoming. The ASP incorporates mixed-use development, higher density housing, and amenities within walking distance, aligning with the MDP's goals. So should council give first reading to this bylaw, the public hearing, second and third reading are proposed for May 20th. The public hearing will be advertised in Fort Record for 2 consecutive weeks. Notices will be mailed out to all the property owners within the ASP plan area, and notice of the proposed bylaw and public hearing will be posted on the city's website and social media accounts. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, and just before we go to questions, the motion that is in the package says May 13th, but it should say May 20th. And just for council's information, that is a committee of the whole meeting, but we are going to be doing a regular committee or a regular meeting and a committee of the whole meeting so that we can get this dealt with, just so that everybody's aware of the dates, the times, and changes. So when we get to the motion, it will be for May 20th. Okay? Councillor Harris, questions?
Given the fact that this is the next major growth node for the city post-annexation, and it will ultimately see development over a longer period of time, what is the significance? And I don't recall having run across it in the past, maybe, and it is, but what's the significance of the Roseburn name? And does it comply with any naming protocols or policies that we have relative to coming up with a name for an area? Or is it something the developer just, well, one of the developers thought was kind of a funky name? What's the significance of Roseburn?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, if I remember correctly, because this conversation was quite a long time ago, but there was, I think, the school in the area that was named Roseburn or something, and that's what the name that was carried forward. So there was some kind of establishment, if not school, it was the name of the farmstead or something, but it was linked to those lands, and that's why the developer proposed the name of the ASP as
And that
Roseburn.
wouldn't surprise me at all. And having dealt with planning in the city of Fort Saskatchewan for a lot of years, I kind of understand where some of this stuff comes from. But I would be interested, and maybe the other members of council would be, to get a little bit more background on that, what it is. I mean, anecdotally, maybe it is. There was a school there. I don't recall. But that would be something that I would find interesting, because we are establishing a significant area. Second question, respecting the fact that the developer that's right now working in that area just to the north, and obviously wants to continue developing activity in our community, which I think we all support. And you noted that the other landowners in the other three quarters have not shown any interest to really do anything, although one of them has, I think, their quarter section for sale. What happens when we end up in a situation where we do all the planning, we get this in place, he starts, and then ultimately we have problems with the other landowners not being motivated to actually move forward with this particular ASP context? Any thoughts on that?
If I can, through your worship. So the area that is planned, the northeast quarter section, that area is entirely owned and works with the applicant here. The future areas, the reason that we have the ASP encompass the entire area is to kind of align our infrastructure with the surrounding, so that we know how many residents are coming generally, how many dwelling units, what roads, things along those lines. However, there's no real way to force the landowner to participate or to end up having to develop the next phase of the ASP. It's kind of as long as they want to maintain their land and don't want to plan it out, they can maintain it as agricultural for as long as they would like.
I understand that. And so in the context of the current developer, he has to work within the land mass that he currently has control over. Ultimately, we do have infrastructure that goes beyond, well, both from a transportation and a utility servicing context, that ultimately becomes problematic in that regard. But I guess that's something that planning will deal with if and when that might happen. And I only ask that question because this is such a new area. And as we go forward, I hope all of our development activity is ultimately focused on making sure that it can be a contiguous development area. And that's why I asked that question in this context at this time. I have no problem with the technical services report and moving forward with this thing. I think it makes eminent sense, and I'm glad to see that the city has done the background work on these adjacent properties that ultimately will hopefully promote contiguous development in a logical and orderly manner. So I'm glad to see that. So that's good. Thanks.
Councillor Blizzard.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So the road on the north side, is it complete all along that whole, right to the east corner of that piece of land, stage one?
Through your worship, I believe there's some difficulties with that extension. There is development agreements in place in terms of noting that the road is to be developed. However, through works with engineering and the developers of that area, I believe that there's discussions about taking cash in lieu possibly for that, as there's limitations to that road actually being developed. So I don't think it's been fully built out, but a good portion of it is. I think the
Because they
last.
would need some of it developed to even access this area, right?
Yes.
It's not all the way through. Okay. And the second question I have is on the one well, actually, I think a few of your drawings in the middle, and I assume they're only major roads, but right in the middle of that stage one, there's just looks like a road in the middle that just is one line. Yeah, I don't know if you can pull it back up. Yeah, like on all of those, you see that gray line that just goes south from the top of the street there. So is that like a major road? Is that other roads will come off of it?
The gray line there, sorry, is just the distinction between the stage.
No,
Sorry.
over from the gray and east of that. Yep. Yeah, so it goes the gray line on this one going, yep, right there. Is that like a road? It looks like to me a road, but just a dead end.
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, that is a collector road, and beyond that point, it turns into a local road. So that's why it is not shown on the area structure plan. It will be reflected in the neighborhood structure plan, but that is the extent of the collector road.
Okay, so they're
trail
all
will
wider collector roads. Then one more little piece that goes with this, I guess. So collector roads tend to be wider. Are traffic circles going to be single lane though? Because I find people have struggle with double lane traffic circles.
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, I do not know the details of the traffic circles at this point in time, but for the public hearing, we can try to bring that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. As always, I'm a bit of a underground infrastructure nerd. So I have questions about stormwater management and then the sewer lift stations that you have in here. The interim lift stations. So let's talk about stormwater management first. So you have in map 10, you have 2 stormwater management facilities that are outside the annex land on private property, but it looks like everything drains onto private property. So like, how is this possible? I was under the assumption that this ASP was going to be gravity feed into North Saskatchewan River, which would make more sense to me, but doesn't appear that the topographical map, I think it's 4, shows that it actually, it grades that direction. So how is this even possible to design this in this way? It kind of looks like it goes down to Ross Creek or something, but you have drawings of these on private property.
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, I'll try my best to answer this one, but maybe in the next public hearing, somebody from the engineering could give you the
And
detailed
perhaps
answer.
it's more of an engineering question.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
The way I understand this, the land drains from west to east. The water will come to the stormwater management facility within this northeast quarter section, and from there it goes to the temporary lift station, and then in the northeast corner of the quarter section, from there it gets released, probably in the ditch.
Right.
In that area. So that's how I understand it currently works, but maybe next time.
Yeah, perhaps it's better for
yeah.
engineering to answer this, because releasing a quarter section of drainage for spring runoff and heavy rainfall into a ditch, I don't. You guys tell me how that works. So I was under the assumption that this was getting tied into current like Point au Pins area structure plan for fallout through Westpark into North Saskatchewan River, which would make a lot more sense to me. That's my question on stormwater management. Sorry, a bit into the weeds. And I do have another one, but maybe
Go ahead.
Okay, so the other one has to do with interim sanitary lift stations. I think you have 2 of them on the map right now. Why would you design this as interim sanitary lift stations? And so if the developer is going to pay the cost of these lift stations, and then the city is going to make plans to have permanent lift stations, who is going to front the cost of that? Are we going to be taking a developer levy for that? And what's the rationale on the interim lift station? that can be tabled as well, because I think that underground infrastructure is extremely expensive, and to do something temporary is that could be a future cost to residents. I would think that's a bit concerning.
Ms. Smith?
Through your worship, I will add some commentary, but we can provide more details later. Your assumptions are correct. The costs for the ultimate infrastructure are substantial. So the lift station was a temporary measure so that we can collect levies on some of the first houses that are in there and ultimately build up the fund that'll pay for the ultimate infrastructure.
Through developer levies or property taxes? Through developer levies.
Through
right?
developer levies.
Okay, yeah. Interested to see where this goes.
Okay, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I've got a couple questions, Mayor Catcher, but I just want to continue with Councillor Nguyen's line for a second. What I just heard leads me to believe then that the city puts in the temporary lift station. I thought the developer would have done that sort of work.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, that's correct. Developer puts in the interim lift station.
And the city would be responsible at some later date for the whatever becomes a permanent solution?
It is my understanding that the permanent solution would be financed through the offsite levies. Probably Ms. Duguid could correct me.
Your worship, it depends on who benefits from the infrastructure. So if more than one developer would benefit from the infrastructure, then it would be built by the city and charged back through the offsite levies. If only one developer benefits from the infrastructure, then they are responsible for constructing it to the city standards and for paying for the infrastructure as well.
Okay, excuse me, thank you. Now, to get back, if I can, to where I wanted to start, I too had a question around the name Roseburn, and I would welcome any comments that administration can bring back. My initial reaction to the name is that it leaves me wanting, so let's leave it at that and see if it makes more sense when we look at it a bit deeper. The drainage map on map 4, page 63, I think, of the report, shows the west quarter draining into the east quarter. So the northwest corner drains essentially to the northeast corner. I'm assuming that drainage from the northwest quarter will be readily handled as the northeast corner is developed out. In other words, what stops this from becoming a problem? I would have thought, in other words, we would start upstream and build downstream rather than the other way around.
Through your worship, so with the first stage of the development, it was noted that the stormwater management pond there, while not being entirely developed, a good portion of it would be developed with the initiation of this. So that would be the intention, to aid in facilitating capture of drainage into that area, if that answers your question.
Well, I'll leave it to somebody to conclude that, in fact, the ponds will handle the flow from another 160 acres that aren't currently being developed. So that's my concern. Not that we have ponds, but that the ponds will handle the area that they might ultimately have to handle. One other easy question, if I may, Mayor Catcher, and then I am done. There was reference made to the transportation and the active transportation paths next to the collector roads. I like the fact that there's some pathways next to the collector roads. Would those pathways then also serve as bike lanes so that two-wheel pedal bikes aren't sharing the road with cars doing 50 kilometers an hour?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, our standards are to provide multi-use trails along collector and arterial roads, so they will accommodate bikes, wheelchairs, any tools of active transportation.
Super. Thank you. I'm done, Mayor Catcher.
Okay, thank you. So, excuse me. Go on to round two. Councillor Harris.
So raise the issue of stormwater management. The Galloway drainage ditch is a significant natural drainage profile that runs further to the east, and it runs from the southwest to the northeast and ultimately does bisect Ross Creek further down. Is this section and quarter sectional development then integrated into that drainage profile in some way, shape, or form? Or I would imagine if we've done the technical analysis of that, we know that that's where it's not going to where Councillor Noyen is referenced. I don't know where that came from, but it's my understanding it should go to basically to the south and to the east, and then ultimately to Ross Creek. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, I think that is correct. I think ultimately this stormwater will go to Ross Creek, but again, I will defer that to engineering at the public hearing stage. Design brief was done for the all annexed land, so at that time, the stormwater management for everything that was annexed was looked at, and the map that you are seeing on the screen shows where, in what location, and approximately what size stormwater ponds are required. And accordingly, the system is designed and what is being proposed is being proposed. So I think in the engineering of this entire area and the area structure plan, those things are taken into consideration.
Yeah, in the discussion for the annexation area, we did have, and I was obviously with a number of members of the previous council involved in those discussions, and we looked at the boundary for the southeast corner of the city of Fort Saskatchewan, and that drainage boundary ultimately was why we chose to do that, to create the boundary in that area. So ultimately, I was under the impression that as we got more technical in terms of the design elements, which this planning will ultimately support as it gets developed out, that's kind of what we'd be looking at. So if engineering is in attendance when we have the public hearing, I think there probably will be some technical, probably maybe a little bit too nitty gritty, but I think it's important because we are setting the stage for the next major development area for the city of Fort Saskatchewan for quite some time. So anyways, that's what I asked there. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Kelly, question?
Yes, thank you. I guess to administration and to Councillor Harris, the map 10 on page 869 of the report shows the stormwater management system, and I believe it shows a pipeline system that does not make use of that collection system that Councillor Harris was referring to. So let's leave it for now and look forward to better and more complete information. But I think Mr. Councillor Noyen is dead on. This is designed to haul it out to the east and then to the north, not to the south and the west. So I'll wait for further clarification.
Okay, so we're good? Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. Councillor Harris?
When the time comes, I'd be prepared to put the motion on the table.
That would be fine. There doesn't appear to be any other questions. Go ahead.
Okay, we're setting the stage for a major development area, so I'd be prepared to move that council give first reading to bylaw C9-25 to adopt the Roseburn Area Structure Plan, and further the public hearing be scheduled for May
20th.
May the 20th at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
I think we've had a little bit of discussion today about the importance of this particular area. There's a lot of interesting things that we'll probably roll our sleeves up over time and get into, and I am of the confidence that administration will be able to answer all those questions.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. Not seeing anything on close?
Nothing.
You're good, thank you. The motion is now closed for first reading. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, are there any notice of motions? Okay, not hearing any. Are there any points of interest? What people have been up to? No? Pardon? Go ahead. Councillor Blizzard.
Yeah, I'll just update. We had our second annual Library Giving Day, and it was to bring awareness to that the library is a nonprofit and to encourage some donations. And we received over 7,000 in donations, which we were very happy with.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Harris.
It's not about a point of interest. It's on the next one, Councillor Inquiry.
Okay, well, I'm going to councillor inquiries now, so go ahead.
Well, thank you. Obviously, we saw a fair amount of deterioration in our road network structures in various areas of the newly developed area, primarily South Fort, and some areas in West Park have ultimately shown some infrastructure deterioration. Could administration consider providing maybe some information for councillors' edification in relation to what we're doing to do a better job of fixing potholes, and is there more of an underlying problem with the subsurface in some of these roads that ultimately is going to speak to more considerable rehabilitation of some of the road networks? South Fort Boulevard, for example, is in horrible condition. A lot of that would be subject to subsurface deterioration or poor asphalt. So I'd be curious if administration has any background on that, or would be prepared to provide some information to council relative to what we're going to do to remediate some of that deterioration in our road network.
Through your worship, I'll just comment quickly and then I'll hand it to Ms. Smith-Duguid. I did have a conversation with Roads about this. I think your second point about poor asphalt quality is actually more where they believe the issue is. And we can follow up with some additional technical information on the current road conditions, because we do a full analysis. I think it's every 4 or 5 years we update the condition ratings, and then that informs the road rehab program.
I think council would benefit from some background information in that regard. I don't think it has to be too detailed or too technical, but enough to give us a sense that ultimately administration is on that deterioration and is working in the best interest of ensuring that we don't inherit significant infrastructure deterioration problems going forward.
Okay, go ahead. Janelle?
Through your worship, yes, I can provide a little bit more detail since we have had conversations with engineering about South Fort Drive in particularly. To Mr. Fleming's point, we do look at the structural integrity on a regular rotation. It was evaluated last fall and no structural issues were identified with the underlying surface. That being said, South Fort Drive is planned to be repaved as part of the 2025 road rehab program.
Okay, great. All right, so that appears to be all of the inquiries. So I will take a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Blizzard.
And we can motion that we go into in camera for the items covered under FOIP.
Great, thank you. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. All right, we will recess to in camera.